Jamie. I'm so excited to do this interview with you. It's been great chatting with you the last few minutes and getting to know you a little bit, even more than when we met at your
We had a quick meet
meeting.
at the field retreat, which was nice, but this was our first let's actually talk meeting. So
Yeah, well, because you had how many guests there that day that I met you?
I think we had 250 this year.
Wow. 250 foster and adoptive moms gathered at your field retreat. So, if anyone watching doesn't know who you are, I'm a fangirl of all things
You're
media that you do. So, you have an incredible Instagram following. Uh, Everyone watching this who does know who you are will want to know, how did you get 50,000 followers on Instagram?
So I had something I wrote that was really just for my church family about foster care that went viral. And so I kind of joke that I had to grow into the following I had. I had to sort of like catch up with the expertise that people were assuming came with a following like that. And so there's definitely been a learning curve of I started writing about foster care as a new foster parent, and I have certainly grown and changed and have different views than when I first started writing. And so we have uh it's definitely been a journey of learning sort of the trust that people were asking just by following.
So now all of a sudden we are having technical difficulties.
Oh no.
Yeah, you went out a little bit there. So I wonder if there's anything I can do to make it better.
When you see my name, if you like when you see my name, is the color red or white?
It's white.
Okay, so you're white now too. So I wonder if we just had a quick glitch.
Okay. All right, great.
So do you want me to just re-say that answer?
Um, so let me just I'll try to summarize because it might be there. We'll just see. So you amassed a huge following on Instagram, over 50,000 people, because you wrote this piece about your experience in foster care that went viral. Yep. And then suddenly you had this overnight quote fame, this internet fame that you had to kind of grow into and step into. Wow. So you weren't ready for that. It sort of came to you and you chased after it. I know how that can be.
Yeah.
And who takes the pictures on your Instagram? Because they're all beautiful, they're all perfect, they're perfectly color corrected, but you're in all of them. So I'm like, how does this woman do it? She's a wonderful show.
Yeah. So my sister, who it's my sister-in-law, she lives 2 minutes from me, and she is a very gifted artist, professional photographer. Yeah. And Instagram is an interesting thing because it's a medium that celebrates photography and beauty.
Right.
And yet you're also trying to be realistic and really raw about the emotions and the experience, and even the fact that like, yeah, my house is a mess and my kids were screaming and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of the approach that I've taken is like beautiful pictures, raw words, and then in the stories, it's just my family, kind of raw and unfiltered. So
it's great. It's really great. I love it. I love how you show the real thing. I love how you show, what's really going on in the background. You're just doing an amazing job. How many children have you fostered in your family?
You know what? So I'm really bad at numbers, like famously bad at getting the date wrong and all of that. It is definitely right now between 25 and 30. So I think it's 27 or 28.
Over how many years?
7 years. We've been foster parents for 7 years. And
7 years.
Okay. 2 of them have stayed forever. So we have 2 daughters adopted from foster care. And then we have 2 placements in our home right now. We have a 12-year-old girl and a 10-month-old baby boy, and then our 2 biological children.
So 2 biological, 2 adopted from foster care, 2 currently being fostered. So that's 6.
Oh, well, yeah, my 27 or something doesn't even include the biological. So we're definitely closer to the 30 if you include those two kids. Yeah. So right now we have 12, 12, 9, 7, 6, and almost 1 in our home.
Wow. And you're here doing this interview. I'm very impressed.
Well, yeah, going to work is the easy part of my life. So
Ooh, right? To sit here at the desk where we're in
exactly.
charge of
This
everything.
is the highlight.
We're going to talk about a hard topic today, so I wore the
Yeah.
funky readers. I hope they're not too distracting.
All right.
Sometimes it's just too much sad, right?
Yeah.
So with all your experience, I just, was like, what should I ask her about? What should I talk to her about? You have been very open in sharing over the last year the journey that you've been going through with a foster daughter who was with you for an extended period of time and then was reunited. And because you've been so open about that journey, I asked you if we could unpack that a little bit today. I know it's a hard topic, but grief is a real thing in foster care.
Sure.
In everybody in the constellation.
That's a great point.
Yes. And so you've done such a beautiful job walking us through your journey, letting us come alongside you, that I thought we could touch on this because so many women in our community with adoption and foster care, we're all dealing with grief in our children, in the process, things that happen. And particularly, I think fear of grief is one of the things that keeps people away from foster care.
That's a good point.
So tell us, how old was this little girl when you got her? How old was she when she came into your home?
She came to us, oh goodness, it was 3 years ago. So it was between 3 and 5 months. She had a few months with her mother and then came to us as a young baby.
Oh, she was tiny. Tiny.
I think she was 3 months old.
Wow.
And she was with us for almost 2.5 years.
And your other children were, she was the baby of the family when she came?
When she came, she was the baby of the family. And, 3 years ago, my kids were 3, 4, 5. So a large portion of their life, this wasn't like a foster placement for them. This was their sister that they couldn't remember life without. I mean, I can't remember life without her, and I've had 37 years. And so for half of their little lives to be spent with their sister, they are grieving as well, which is another really hard piece of this is walking through grief as a family and loving my kids well while I'm really struggling. And it's a whole other piece.
When you accepted that placement, did you expect it to be short-term, long-term, moving towards adoption? Did you have any expectations? Where was your heart at the beginning?
So I think this will probably resonate with most foster parents, but I would say specifically in New Jersey, we get very little to no information at all. So my husband's first question is always, how long is this going to be? And my first answer is always, that we don't know the answer to that. And so we definitely came into it with no expectations.
Okay.
This is going to be a reunification. Our hearts are very for reunification. We want to support reunification. But New Jersey is pretty good on following ASFA, which is the Safe Families Act. And it's the timeline that children are supposed to be in foster care for to be able to protect their permanency. And so New Jersey will typically switch from the goal of reunification to the goal of adoption after about a year, if the parents are not really actively supporting health and wholeness. And so when her goal was switched to adoption, I would say that's when our hearts switched to adoption. So even though we remained very close with mom and very supportive of her, there's definitely a shift that happens when the state says to you, like, okay, mom can't do this.
Right.
Will you step up for this child forever? And you let your heart go a little bit more in that. not that we held our hearts in. It's that it's very important to me that I am not allowing my mind to go
Right.
to the daydreaming, to
Right.
the
Right.
questions of forever, to the,
Right.
adoption ceremony.
Right.
I
Let God
hope,
lead, right? Let him give you
yeah,
just what you need right now.
right.
Mhm.
So I have strong reins on my mind. We do not go there. We don't think that way. But once the goal shifts to adoption, I think that's an appropriate time to
Sure.
start allowing that, to
Of
start the
course.
same way. I mean, you want your child to be just
Yeah.
cherished and
Yeah.
desired. And
Yes.
so I definitely let my mind go there because that became the goal.
Of course. And then at some point, obviously, the goal switched back.
Yeah. So
It's been really hard.
COVID, COVID changed a lot of things for a lot
How
of
did
people.
COVID change the goal? It's
So
probably a long story, but can you?
it is a long story, but I think it's helpful because it was a pivotal point for my heart because we had an adoption worker, we were working towards the adoption things, and basically the worker called and said all of the things that need to be done for this cannot be done in a global pandemic. We literally cannot like get the experts, do everything, and it cannot just stand still. And so either the train needs to be moving forward towards adoption or it needs to be flipped back to reunification. So it was very much a technicality. It was very much, we can't stand still. We have a certain timeline to get everything in. We can't get the timeline in because of COVID. It was towards the beginning of the virus. And
My
so it
goodness.
was like this technicality. And that was when mom got clean for the first time in a year. And she got a job for the first time in a year. And the worker came to my house and looked at me and said, if it weren't for COVID, you would be adopting this baby.
Wow.
And I felt like at that time I had two choices. And one was to cry and say, COVID ruined my life,
Yeah,
stole
for
my
sure.
daughter, destroyed my family.
Right.
The other is to say, oh, God created this space for this mother to see her daughter, to know what she needed to do, to get the help and become healthy. And it was very much a choice for me. How am I going to choose to look
Mhm.
at this? Am I going to choose to see this as something that happened to me that was kind of COVID did? Or am I
Right.
going to see that it was something that God did and that he was doing this really for this little girl, for this family, and just really believing God's heart for unification, God's heart for wholeness of family, and believing it when the rubber hits the road.
Wow. And walking your kids through that, like
Yeah.
helping them understand that the plan has changed. That
Yeah.
must have been very difficult.
It was. I will say we have gotten wise to the system. So the way we communicate with our kids is very honest and very held back.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talk in 3-month increments. We
Right.
give every bit of information we can while also saying, but that the judge could, or that mom could. So we they probably felt less of this seismic shift than we did. Um,
I think that's I think that's some really important coaching because so many families struggle with navigating the process with
sure.
bio children.
Yeah.
And with all of your experience, almost 30 children in your home, I think that's a really important takeaway from this interview is that you've learned, only to go 3 months out with your
Yeah.
other kids.
Yeah.
It's
And to
very
really focus on today, my kids know like today, he is our foster brother. She is our foster sister. We are a family. We focus very much on today. And we know that this is what we're working towards. So they would have known, like, we hope that we'll be adopting her, but also we want her mom to be healthy. And so we are very much just communicating the nuance to them. And
wow.
kids don't do great with nuance. I think humans don't do great with nuance. And
Right.
yet it is vital for foster care. Foster care is all nuance. It is all sitting in the both and of foster care, the this and that. So we've
Wow.
tried to really parent our kids through that.
That's incredible. Your kids will be amazing adults.
I hope
Incredible
so.
adults. So, uh, were you in touch with birth mom during that time when it shifted? Then you started engaging with birth mom?
So
Visits were happening?
we've always had a relationship with mom.
Okay.
That was something, we talked about the platform and me having to like learn alongside in this public way. And when I first became a foster parent, I really thought reunification was like this unfortunate thing that happens sometimes. And God really did a shift in my heart, I think, theologically about like his heart for the family and
I
his
love
heart
that.
for wholeness.
Yes.
And so I came into our relationship with a strong conviction to really foster that as much as possible. And then just to be fully transparent, she was very easy to love, very open, very grateful, very sweet. So we had a really great relationship. So I would say our dynamic didn't change because our dynamic was always, I'm praying for you. How can I help you? I'm the first person you call when you're struggling. You
Wow.
know that I love you. You know that I hope that she's going back to you. I was actually the one who explained to her she didn't even realize that the goal had switched back.
Wow.
She sat in court, and which, you want to talk takeaways. There's another takeaway. I have learned that one of the ways that foster parents, I think, can most support kids' parents and reunification is to be that stand-in. We understand the system
Right.
often better than our kids' parents do. And
Yeah.
they have a lawyer who is, kind of just doing the bare minimum, not calling them back usually, and showing up and speaking for them. And so to be able to walk them through the steps of what is happening next and what's expected of them and what these things mean, she never understood what was happening in court. And so I was able to let her know that, like, yeah, this shifted back. The goal is not adoption now. And it was one of the stranger conversations I've ever had in my life, because she cried and cried and cried in grief that her daughter would be losing us. And
Wow.
I was comforting her
Wow.
as I was in this grief of knowing what this
Oh
meant.
my word. It's so complex.
It is. It is complex.
So
And
complex.
you said that before, there's grief for every member of the tribe.
Everyone in yes.
There's no like winner.
Yeah.
There's no, there's always loss. And I think that's part of what's really hard.
So you almost functioned like a guardian ad litem for her, which is beautiful, Jamie. I mean, that is so the heart of the Lord. That's so beautiful because you've had, 25 experiences with the system and she only had hers. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
So
But mom's heart was always that we would be parents to her daughter and that we would be family to her.
wow.
So while I held that loosely and tried to help my kids hold it loosely, even though by this point they had relationship with her, so I could watch the way I talked, but she promised things to them
Oh,
that, that complicated that part. But
how physically close to you is mom? And
so she's about a half hour away. We looked at apartments that were right down the road because she really wanted us to stay involved. But she moved about a half hour away, which is to where she was before. And she rekindled her relationship with dad. And I think what we thought was going to be a really sweet, extended family situation where we would continue to do life together has not been that. And so I believe that she is doing what she thinks is best for her daughter. I think that a lot of biological family, they foster care is the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
Right. So who
They
wants to be
want it
reminded of that?
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want they want that part of their lives to be done. It's challenging and painful for their children.
Yes.
And so we had a little bit of contact, and it was, in her opinion, very traumatic for our little girl, very painful for her and confusing for her. And so she's
Imagine.
chosen for us not to have any contact with her at all.
Oh,
So
that's gonna be so hard.
yeah, so she's about a half hour away. We could go and get her anytime, we could visit anytime, and yet
Yeah.
there's no contact there.
So you're really grieving it now because you're fully separated from her. I'm sorry. That's got to be
Yeah,
hard on you, hard on your family, your kids, your extended family,
sure.
everybody, grandparents, husband.
Yeah, my mom was crying to me earlier this week. It's everyone.
And probably hard on your foster daughter, who's also in her own way has to be grieving not
Mm,
seeing you and will always have memories, of it. She's little, but there'll be this sort of other people that she's trying to sort out,
mhm.
thinking long term. This is it's a really hard thing.
It is hard. It is. And I will say that grief is something that I have not historically been great with. Not that anyone loves negative.
That someone is great with grief. Yeah.
No, I would have a reputation with my friends and family for being like a get over it kind of person. Like, yep, that's hard, that's sad. We're through that. Let's sort of get over it. We looked at apartments that were right down the road because she really wanted us to stay involved. But she moved about a half hour away, which is to where she was before. And she rekindled her relationship with dad. And I think what we thought was going to be a really sweet, extended family situation where we would continue to do life together has not been that. And so I believe that she is doing what she thinks is best for her daughter. I think that a lot of biological family, they foster care is the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
Right. So who
They
wants to be
want it
reminded of that?
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want that part of their lives to be done. It's challenging and painful for their children.
Yes.
And so we had a little bit of contact, and it was, in her opinion, very traumatic for our little girl, very painful for her and confusing for her. And so she's
Imagine.
chosen for us not to have any contact with her at all.
Oh,
So
that's gonna be so hard.
yeah, so she's about a half hour away. We could go and get her anytime, we could visit anytime, and yet
Yeah.
there's no contact there.
So you're really grieving it now because you're fully separated from her. I'm sorry. That's got to be hard
Yeah,
on you, hard on your family, your kids, your extended family,
sure.
everybody, grandparents, husband.
Yeah, my mom was crying to me earlier this week. It's everyone.
And probably hard on your foster daughter, who's also in her own way has to be grieving
Mm,
not seeing you and will always have memories, of it. She's little, but there'll be this sort of other people that she's trying to sort out,
mhm.
thinking long term. This is it's a really hard thing.
It is hard. It is. And I will say that grief is something that I have not historically been great with. Not that anyone loves negative.
That someone is great with grief. Yeah.
No, I would have a reputation with my friends and family for being like a get over it kind of person. Like, yep, that's hard, that's sad. We're through that. Let's sort of get over it. And I think that part of that is a true conviction and joyful practice of applying God's truth two situations and just
Right.
finding the hope of it. So, like a Lamentations 3 of I
Right.
say to myself and, speaking to your soul and telling your heart all these beautiful things about God and how that changes sorrow.
Yes.
Not but I,
And
yeah. And I think that there can be a practice that some of us are too quick to get to like, okay, well, what does the Bible say? Have joy in all circumstances. And if God is for you, and just kind of like putting like a little scriptural band-aid instead of really acknowledging that like Jesus wept. Like
there
Jesus
you go.
knew the truth that Lazarus would be brought back to life. He was about to do it himself. He knew that God had this glorious plan for everyone who was there to watch it and for us to read about it forever. He knew all that truth, but it didn't mean that he didn't have sad emotion. And it didn't mean that that sad emotion wasn't even like beautiful and helpful and maybe worshipful. And
Oh,
so
that-
I'm trying to allow myself to feel sad without going like, okay, you're sad, but God.
mhm.
Um, and I don't know exactly what that line is. I don't know what it looks like to not wallow
Yeah.
in emotion without reminding your heart of truth. But I know that there needs to be a piece where we cry and
Yeah.
where we just go to God with our heartache and our heartbreak without going, well, if I really trust God, then I'll just get over this. And so I'm kind of like in the muck of
Yeah.
figuring out what that looks like. And I don't have an answer yet of a really clear, like, this is what godly grief looks
Yeah.
like. But I know that there's a such thing as godly grief. And that's that's what I'm fighting for.
Yes. And it's not I'm grieving, but God. It's I'm grieving and God, right?
Sure.
He's there with us
Yeah.
during that. Um, I was going through grief one time in my younger life. I lost one of my siblings, and
Mm.
someone told me something I've never forgotten. They said that grief was like a huge boulder on you. And every time you allowed yourself to feel it and you allowed yourself to mourn and cry, the boulder shrunk. And eventually it would become a little pebble and you could put it in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
It would always be there,
Yep. Yep.
but you could take it out and put it back, which is where that grief is for me right now. I could take it out right now and I could let myself feel all of it, but I can also put it back and keep
Mm-hmm.
talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a while to
Mm-hmm.
shrink that boulder. So
Yeah.
just
And I think there are the physical ramifications of grief as well, which is what I really was experiencing. I was very tired,
right.
very kind of lethargic, really craving comfort and
Yes.
home. And
Yes.
so even though there wasn't like depression in my mind, I wasn't thinking there's no hope and she's not okay and I'll never be okay.
Mm,
There was depression in my body. My
yeah.
body was mourning the loss of my little girl.
Yes.
Um, even though I was fighting to believe the things.
Yeah.
So,
So, what would you offer to a woman who's watching this, who is considering entering into foster care now that you've shared very transparently how hard this was, knowing this could happen to me? And I realize I'm asking you a very hard question because you're still in the
for
grief.
sure.
What would you say at this point to someone who's like, I can't face that. I can't
Yeah.
face that.
Well, I will say that with the view of grief coming, we still chose to say yes to two other kids, which I
Mm,
think shows not like anything special about us, but just how deeply we believe that this is worth it.
wow.
And for me, that is a game changer. Doing hard things for the glory of God and the good of others, I sometimes think it's trite and people want a more practical answer. But for me, living for eternity,
Right.
is the answer. So like, yeah, our light and momentary troubles for sure, but they're achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all.
Wow.
So fighting to really remember and believe that this is heavy and long, but really it's light and momentary.
Yes.
It's not just like part of it, it's actually achieving this glory that far outweighs it. And I think the more that we just have this really meta sort of let's step back and look at what we're doing here. Oh my goodness. What did we do? We gave this girl everything her brain and body needed for two and a
Yes.
half years.
During the most critical years.
If that is all we did,
Right.
we touched her and smiled at her and hugged her and kissed her and made her feel safe and
Yeah.
cherished when her brain and body were really forming in this really important time.
Yes.
We, put little seeds of the fact that God made her, Jesus loves her in
Yes.
her heart. We built a relationship with her mom that right now we are in sort of the brokenness of it, but God's story doesn't end in brokenness. And
Exactly.
so my
Every
hope
season's
is that,
ahead. Yes.
right.
Mhm.
I hope that there's relationship and I believe that God can do that, but it's not even like that is my hope. My hope isn't that, oh, in a year we'll all be happily ever after. My hope is that somehow God will use what we've seeded into her as well and the love and relationship there to draw her to himself, to heal things in her.
Mhm.
So not to mention the things it's done in our kids, the things it's done in our hearts, and
Sure.
just the joy and love we had for 2.5 years. I mean, it might sound trite, but just the whole like it's better to love than
Yes.
lost than to never have loved at all. Like we have just this sweetness of loving her for 2.5 years. So
That's
when
beautiful.
I can look at not just, oh, there's a craving in my heart to hold my girl in my arms,
Mhm.
but oh, what did we do? What did God do? What was this really
Yes.
about?
Yes.
What did he accomplish? What has he and still is accomplishing? I think that the more that we can shift, and this is goodness, if you're doing the dishes, if you're going to work, if you're changing diapers, whatever we do, if we can shift out and see how everything is eternal, everything can be about the glory of God and the good of others, then it all has purpose. I hate doing the dishes. I hate changing diapers. But when I have a view of how it's eternal,
Yes.
it changes everything. And so that's my answer for foster care is like, yeah, it's hard. And the day to day can be so hard. But the year to year and the lifetime and the
Yes.
eternity, man,
Yes.
that is where the joy is. So
Amen. That's beautiful. Well, this has just been an amazing time to talk to you. I could sit here and talk to you about this for the next
agreed.
couple hours, but we try to keep these interviews short because moms are too busy.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, quickly, just tell us about your book that's coming out. What's
Sure.
it called and when's it coming?
Yes. My book is called Foster the Family, and it is practical lessons from God's word, sort of direction for foster parents and direction and encouragement.
We'll be praying for you. Thank you
Thank you.
for your ministry and thank you for being so raw and transparent and just letting people see what it's really, really like and making it so beautiful on Instagram.
You can thank my sister for that part. Thanks, Jody. Thanks for this conversation.
God bless you.
Thanks.